Chapter 5. Rivals. Duria, a city that rules an empire of cities. It draws food from paved roads and drink from bridges of water. Once, Durians were people not so different from us, scattered and free. Then they built towns, and towns became cities. Cities hatched politics. Politics spawned war, and from all that strife and bloodshed, Duria rose as mistress of them all. But once greatness has run its course, there's always anger and blame enough to share. This is what the empire had become. As emperor and coolness grew frail, so the simmering brew of politics had begun to seethe and churn into a rolling boil. And what would now stoke that fire further? Exactly. Keetish gold. Jorwin Weaver, The Keetish Cycle. Kerne helped Elayna with her harvest, as promised, but they had a problem. The new mill had been put straight to work, and the demand for her beans had withered. "How about money from the mine?" Kerne suggested one evening as he carved the fresh wood of her rafters. When he had spare time, like now, he would shape spirals of leaves with the occasional animal scurrying amongst them. His work delighted her, and that was all the reward he needed. "I've never had use for it. Trubios holds it for me." Elayna fixed him with a stern gaze, but her voice was soft. "No, please, don't think me ungrateful, but taking your money doesn't solve anything." He blushed and returned his attention to his crafting. She was intent on driving a bone needle through a coarse woolen weave. "Is that a winter cloak?" he asked, to try and change the subject. "Aye. It won't be long until Uzvawel blows. Do you know Pyra, the Drazian?" "No. What made you think I did?" "Oh," she shrugged. "I don't know. You both seem a little aloof from the village, which gives you something in common." He laughed. "Wouldn't that make us even less likely to know each other?" "I like your laugh," she said, cocking her head in mock thought before announcing, "You should do it more often. You're far too serious." "I only asked because she's always passing through but never staying. Sometimes she sees me father." "What about?" "No idea." Elayna shrugged off the mystery. They settled into a companionable silence until he realized that she was watching him as he worked. Her eyes were full of troubles, and yet the set of her jaw was firm. "What is it?" he asked cautiously. She took a moment to answer. "Thank you, Kerne. Truly." He let the warmth in his heart show in his smile. Then he got a grip and shrugged off the praise, nervous about where it might lead. Any friend would do the same. "Really? Where are they?" "The house," Kerne gestured to the hut with his knife, "is a wonderful gift. You must think me ungrateful." She looked downcast. "No, I just—" He ran out of words. Fortunately, she had not finished. "I am thankful. It's the looks I get. I've had attention from many men." She shook her head in dismay. "Men who tell me to leave this place." She rammed the needle through the cloth. Kerne winced as she narrowly missed her own finger. "I mean, do I look helpless? You work with me. You may lighten me load, but you expect me to do me share." That is the way amongst the orcs, he thought to himself, still wondering where she was going with this conversation. "Oh!" She sat up and stared hard at the wall, as if it hid the words she needed to explain herself. She swallowed, and the indignation drained away. "I'll miss him," she whispered. Kerne became rooted to the spot. Should he offer her comfort? Or would that be taking advantage? She wiped a swelling tear away before it could fall. "Sorry, Kerne. I'm being silly." He reached down and touched the back of her shoulder. "No, it's not silly. It's human. To be human is to love, and to love is also to grieve." The next day, the autumn sun was making its last good effort for the year, making an excellent day to harvest Elayna's second crop. Kerne leaned down to grip a stalk. They only had the one scythe, so he pulled his up by the roots. Charga's been in the field. He pointed out the thin footprint of the orc vagabond in the soft soil. "Let me see," Elayna said. Kerne stepped back for her to look. Feeling hot, he pulled off his tunic and wiped his brow. "It's odd," she shrugged. "He never pilfers from any other farm. Poor creature. What would he do when our beans are in?" Kerne grunted as a stalk resisted him. He pulled it free with a spray of mud and added it to the pile. "He'll be fine, just as he was last year and the year before that. He has an orc's instinct to trap and hunt." He studied her as she bent to hack the next line of stalks. To Elayna, a little pilfering was preferable to the thief starving to death, even if the thief was an orc. That gave him such hope. He put a hand on her shoulder. "It's good that you care." She met his eyes in a manner that made him uncomfortably aware that he was stripped to the waist and spattered in mud. Unlike an orc, his chest was hairless, and she could see the goose pimples rise. "Elayna!" Despite there being no reason for guilt between them, they sprang apart at the unexpected hail. Kerne gave a bittersweet grin when he saw who had saved him from the awkward moment. "Leusios!" Councillor Leusios was the toast of the village. He worked at the new mill and had taken on apprentices to pass on the miller's trade. "Have you had much business for your crop?" The young man asked Elayna, sparing Kerne a friendly nod. "No. I may be able to barter some of it as animal feed." "No need," Leusios announced with a wide grin. With a flourish, he produced a pouch bulging with coins. "I will buy it. Beans, stalks, and roots. All of it." Elayna pushed her wet hair out of her eyes. The rain was getting heavier. "We should call it a day," she shouted to Kerne, who was several rows over. They were digging up the bean roots that Leusios so bizarrely insisted on buying last week. Kerne inspected the leaden sky and nodded. They were both soaked and needed to dry and warm by the fire before the chill set in. This late in autumn, the river Ruthiel often flooded the fields, and it was a muddy slog back to her hut. "Wait." Kerne put an arm out to stop her and sniffed the air. "What is it?" she asked. "Humans. Unfamiliar to me. Their scent. Woodland. Rough living." His lips curled back. "Weapon oil." "Bandits?" Elayna gasped. They'd heard the stories. Gold had attracted more than prospectors. They crept closer to the hut, using a marshy hillock as cover. A man was on watch at the top of the steps of her stilt hut. The rest of the gang were rummaging through her home. A fury stirred within her. She didn't have much after the fire, and everything left she had worked for. She gripped her wooden shovel. "My spear's inside." He nodded. "Stay back." "Scorch it!" "No, we do this together." Elayna did not like fighting, but that didn't mean she would shy away from it. Kerne just nodded. They circled around the hut, out of sight of the sentry, and then crept between the stilts, staying beneath the plank floor. Kerne raised 4 fingers. She nodded. 4 bandits. Kerne reached up, grabbed the ankles of the sentry above, and pulled hard. The man gave a yelp of surprise before slamming into the mud. His neck snapped. Elayna darted forward and pulled the short sword from his scabbard. It was an old Durian infantry blade. She was familiar with it and tossed her spade to Kerne, who caught it deftly. One bandit with a knife emerged with a scowl. "Little was stealing, and now trouble," he spat as 2 more joined him. Elayna glanced at Kerne. Outwardly composed, she saw a wildness in his eyes. It was both thrilling and terrifying. "This is your one chance to flee," she warned them. "It's good advice," Kerne agreed, his measured tone belying the glowering threat in his glare. One of the men, the only other one with a sword, pushed to the front. "We have honest work." He grinned as he studied Kerne. "At least now we do. Run along, girl. We just want your friend." Elayna frowned. It was an odd answer. "Get out of me home," she insisted. "Leave all you've taken." The bandit nodded. "Drop it all. We got a bigger prize." "Is that the airfolk the boss wanted?" one asked. "The bonus?" He grinned maliciously. Kerne spoke under his breath. "If they're after me, you should go."
"And let them prey on other homesteads?"
"No." The bandits sized them up as they descended the steps. Elayna gripped her sword nervously.
"What next?"
Kerne's answer was an explosive action. He charged and caught the lead bandit on the bottom step. He swung the spade two-handed. It broke on the bandit's head, caving in one side of his skull. The next bandit leapt at Kerne from the steps, staggering him, and then stabbed him with a shriek of mad delight. The last bandit, also carrying a knife, chose Elayna as the easier prey. Rather than settle into her guard stance, as she had hundreds of times against her father, Elayna backed off with a cry of fear. The ruse worked. He grinned and lunged. She twisted aside and hacked at his weapon arm. The sword's poor edge tore a bloody gash deep to the bone. The bandit screamed and stumbled back. Elayna had no interest in finishing an unarmed man. Kerne threw off his attacker, but the bandit sprang up. Bleeding and weaponless, the half-orc fell into a grappling stance. His eyes fixed on the bandit's blade as the ruffian drove him back with several swipes. Elayna seized the moment to attack. She had trained often, but was no seasoned warrior. The bandit dodged her and darted in to slash her forearm. There was a spatter of scarlet, and she cried out. Kerne bellowed in fury and leapt. Even Elayna shrank back from his animalistic rage as he knocked the bandit down and grabbed him by the throat. As quick as the frenzy had possessed him, it was gone. He blinked and paused. Elayna saw the bandit recover the grip on his knife and thrust. "No!" She lunged forward, and her sword struck with a sickening scrunch of tearing flesh and breaking ribs. The bandit's scream cut off as his lung punctured and his heart burst. Shaking, Elayna backed away, leaving the sword buried in the bandit's chest. Kerne snarled at the injured bandit, who whimpered and fled. Elayna avoided looking at the three bodies now scattered around her home and gritted her teeth against the pain in her arm. "Can you walk?" she asked Kerne as he stood gingerly feeling each stab wound. He grimaced. "I heal fast. I'll be fine." "Me father will be the judge of that. Back to Blackstone. I'm not sleeping here tonight." "You first." Kerne fetched his gear from the hut and then bandaged her arm. "You know he'll ask me to join the militia again," he said conversationally. The change of subject, while blood still ran down his hip, was absurd but welcome. "We just killed 3 men," Elayna thought. "And why won't you?" She played along despite the hammering of her heart. "It will earn you the confidence of the village." "I would like that, but a fight is different. You need to trust the fighters around you, and they won't trust me. Not yet." "Why not?" she asked, noting how awkwardly he moved as they headed up to the valley track. "Because if an orc war party comes down the pass, they'll doubt which side I'm on. I need to prove myself," he admitted through gritted teeth. "I'm just not sure how." "Well," she smiled grimly, "you've proven yourself to me, and you will always be welcome here." A week later, after Hal had raged about bandits and the corpses had been burned, life returned to a wary normal. True to his word, Kerne healed fast and was able to pull the handcart stacked with bean roots into town for Leusios. As he entered the market round, he saw Marcos Ambronius emerging from the Old Fire Inn in the blue swirl of his cloak. Leusios and a guard of 2 legionaries were close on his heels. "I'm impressed by your fortified villa," Leusios was saying. Marcos was in full stride, forcing the shorter Keith to skip a step to keep up. He spoke brusquely back over his shoulder. We are grateful for the space, and the woodland provides the timbers for our stockade. I am surprised how poorly defended your village is, given the threat of orcs." The Durian paused as they came close to Kerne. "I have another load of bean roots, Leusios." Kerne gestured to the laden cart. The noble spoke before Leusios could answer. "What are you?" Kerne blinked at the abruptness of the man. It took him a moment to realize the question was made with genuine curiosity and without prejudice. "My name is Kerne. I am—" I am a half-orc. He felt a dozen eyes on him from Blackstoners, amused by the Durian's blunt inquiry. I have heard of you, Marcos mused. The strength of a beast and the discipline of a monk. Have you considered the military role? The audacity of the question stunned Kerne. Aye, he's a masterful warrior, Leusios was quick to confirm. You are generous, replied Kerne evenly. But my life is here. So is mine, until my orders are discharged, Marcos said thoughtfully. I would have a place for someone like you in my guard. I understand you have 100 legionnaires here now, Kerne reasoned. I am just one man. A blare of horns stopped Marcos's reply. The voices in the market round dwindled as people stopped to listen to the rhythmic crump, crump, crump of marching feet. Marcos's eyes narrowed as he turned to face the trade road south. He uttered the name of his rivals, loading every syllable with distaste. Caesonius. A column of 40 legionnaires and supply wagons was marching up the road, led by an officer on a black horse. The leader was fair-haired for a Durian and had a composed sharpness about him. He wore a chest piece made from woven strips of leather and stained black. His upper arms were protected by hanging strips of leather weighted by brass studs. Perhaps not as showy as a Thaliani breastplate, but just as effective. A captain marching alongside him wore a bearskin, and the legionaries wore functional armor, black cloaks, and crests. Marcos Ambronius of House Thalianus. The fair-haired noble affected delight and surprise as he swung off his steed. The captain shouted an order, and the column halted with a single synchronized stamp of feet. Marcos remained stony-faced. Antoninus Genicus of House Caesianus, he said flatly. Leusios bowed and put his palm to his chest. Greetings, Lord Genicus. My name is Councillor Leusios. Thank you for your courier's advance notice. Antonius bounced his fist off his chest in a jaunty manner. Delighted to meet you too, Councillor. I understand we have the other half of what you call Cledger Wood? Yes, replied Leusios. You'll find all the timber you need there. This is welcome news. In return, I have a few gifts for you and your fellow councillors. Antonius continued smoothly, delighting in Marcos's palpable irritation. Silks and spices from Jaffa, jewelry from Ephanius, and fine blades from Parvenus. Even this new Durian could not resist passing a calculating eye over Kerne. You are too kind, Leusios beamed. With the others distracted, Kerne picked up the handcart and hauled it towards Leusios's roundhouse as quickly as he could. The last thing he wanted was to be caught up in Durian politics. Winter gripped Blackstone hard that year. In the bitter cold, every loaf baked was a reminder of Mistress Murgathwin's strict discipline that made the food stocks last. Everyone gathered in the market round for the night of Tulfest, the longest night of the year. A great bonfire was lit, and Blackstone drank and made merry to ward off the minions of Morka stalking in the darkness. For the first time in years, the celebration had a note of optimism, and the itinerant folk, such as Dythan Pathfinder and Pyrrha the Dragian, wintered in the village. They shared tales from the icy Canary hegemony in the north, and the vast Prectari grass seas in the east, and the splendid Durian cities in the south. As was the custom, in the darkest hour they gathered around the cart to hear the village leaders speak. Vibnia gave a stirring sermon about the power of Blackstoners when they worked together. Then they listened attentively to Mistress Murgathwin's careful advice for the rest of the winter. However, the person that they wanted to hear the most was Leusios. The crowd became excited as he mounted the cart. He started by picking out Gardren Fisher from the crowd. Gardren, who will remember your name? The young man went red with the sudden attention and shrugged. Me children, I guess. And may there be many, Leusios beamed, enjoying the laughter from the crowd. The breeze was strong and made the flames from the torches around the cart twist and gush. His fine white hair ruffled and soaked up both the flickering colors of the torchlight and the shadows of the night. He dropped his voice to a stage whisper. "Let me tell you the secret of immortality." Quiet descended. "Think on this. The monastery here in Blackstone is known of in the Emperor's palace in far Duria. Over 1,000 years of devotion are in those stone walls. We can never know the names of the monks who have prayed there, but the whole world knows of that monastery. No one's name can survive all the centuries, yet what we build can. We stand upon the threshold of immortality. It'll be won by all those who put their hearts and souls into this, our home. Yes, we are a growing town once more, and perhaps one day the greatest city in the north. I've seen what you can do, and I know you can do more. We shall build this town not for us, nor just for our children's children, but for all the eternal generations who will follow." "You are fools, all of you!" The crowd startled and parted to allow Abbot Scutarius to stride through, flanked by 4 monks. Leusios smoothed over the intrusion. "Leusios, good of you to join us and bless this tool fest." "I do not bless you!" The abbot leapt onto the cart with surprising agility, forcing Leusios back in surprise. "I do not bless you," he repeated with fist balled and sweeping his staff balefully over the crowd. "I came here to curse you. I curse your gold. I curse your greed. I warned this boy," he cuffed Leusios, "and your so-called council about what would happen if you took this course." The abbot slammed his staff on the edge of the cart, sending a sharp crack into the night. "For generations, we have let you farm our land in return for a tithe and our protection." Leusios was seething, but felt intimidated by the abbot's rage. Nevertheless, a spark of defiance made him stand forth. "And you need us if that tithe is ever to be yielded." There were a few mutters of support, but most were gripped by terror for the old tyrant. Encouraged, Leusios went on. "Do not overstate your rights, Father Scu." Elayna' staff caught him with a stunning blow that knocked him off the cart. The night flipped and the moon spun overhead. Then the ground knocked the wind out of him. He gasped and blinked, taking a moment to refocus on Elayna. The old man ignored him. "You will till our land. You will pay the tithe, but do not look to us for salvation from your own folly. Be it bandit, orc, or demon, I am withdrawing our protection." A gasp rippled through the crowd. A hand helped Leusios up. It was Antonius Genicus. "Are you hurt, counselor?" Too angry to answer, he just nodded his thanks and scrambled back onto the cart, but the abbot and his monks were already departing. "So, the monks won't protect us," he shouted at their receding backs. "Don't we have our own militia?" He looked at Captain Hal, who was frowning. Yes, there was a militia, but it was nothing compared to the martial monks. Leusios ignored him and instead glanced back at Antoninus. The Caesonii raised an eyebrow, and then Lucius smiled at him. He raised his arms to the crowd. "We will buy weapons of fine Parvanian steel. Antoninus, will you train our people?" The Durian covered his surprise well. There was a spark of calculation in his eyes, and then he declared in a clear voice, "We shall." "As will we." Marcos Ambronius forced his way to the front, glaring at his adversary. Leusios beamed and blessed the contention between the great houses. He ignored Mistress Murgathwin, covering her mouth in horror. "Our thanks to our Durian friends. It is time to throw off the shackles of the monastery. They can have their tithe, for it shall be a pittance compared to our prosperity. I promised you immortality. The days to survive are over. Now we will thrive," he declared, punching the air with his fist. Leusios accepted the roar of approval and shook the many hands thrust at him. He saw Kerne, his head above any other in the crowd. The half-orc was staring at him with a mix of astonishment and respect. Elayna was next to him. That made his smile falter briefly. The day he had bought Elayna's crop, he had sensed intimacy between them. That needed watching. He had to discover the secret of Elayna's crop. And yes, he admitted in the privacy of his own thoughts, he felt drawn to Elayna, too. The next day, Leusios lay in his bed, a luxury from the Empire, staring at the rafters and considering Elayna and Kerne. "Are we rivals?" he asked the thatch. Those orcish features disfigured him to the narrow-minded Blackstoners, but that was looking through the eyes of prejudice. Orcish skin was a leathery brown, marked by blemishes and cysts from their tough life on the steppes. In contrast, Kerne's skin was smooth and healthy. The heavy-set jaw made a striking line, and those bright blue eyes were breathtaking, even from within the shadow of his helmet. Orc hair was a thatch of coarse bristles like an animal's. However, Kerne's lush black mane flowed silky soft to his shoulders. Keats wore their hair long, and many would have been envious of those locks if they bothered to stop and admire them. "Even those carnivorous teeth fail to mar him," Leusios grumbled to himself as he got up. Indeed, they only served to accentuate his handsome looks. "Flowers!" He lit the fire and stirred the pot of root concentrate under the still. The spicy scent tantalized him. Almost there, but not quite. The laborious process of boiling, filtering, and repeated distillation had taken most of the winter. The roots had been ugly, lumpy things with hairy nodules, and now he sensed that they too held the same essence. He placed a glass bottle under the nozzle. If Elayna saw the real Kerne, then she might fall for him. "And what would that mean for my crop?" he muttered to the room. He set out to attend to business around Blackstone, and when he returned was pleased to see the small bottle full of distilled essence. Finally, the entire root crop captured into a single bottle. The spicy odor was strong this time. If the magic followed the scent, then each bottle held the essence of power. Stronger than the beans? He wondered out loud. He flicked the side to dislodge droplets so they slid into the fluid, and then he stoppered it. He placed it on the shelf with two other bottles labeled bean and stalk. If the root was the strongest, then was the secret in the soil or the water? "The roothiol?" he exclaimed. The possibility stunned him. The river had saved him, or had it been the magic all along? Hammering at his door interrupted the thought. "Leusios!" Mikrig shouted. He frowned in irritation, but put on a placid air of curiosity before opening the door. "What is it?" "Captain Hal has arrested 2 of the Durian nobles." Aha! That would go down well with the most powerful nation in the world. Leusios could scream at the oafishness of muscle-headed men like Hal, but to the hunter he kept his cool. "And Mistress Murgathwin has called the council?" "Aye, she said to be quick," pressed Mikrig. "Let's not keep the council waiting, then." 30 Keetish militia had formed a defensive semicircle around the old Fire Inn. Bracing their spears against the threat of 2 separate decari of Durians, 10 men in Thaliani blue, and the other 10 in Kazonii black. They had a grimness of soldiers ready to do battle. It just wasn't clear who was going to fight who. He deliberately walked between the 3 armed groups and took his time to study them all. "We are here for mutual gain, not bloodshed." The Durian legionaries gave no reaction. Helios Paxilus, the Kazonii captain, was a stout and serious young man. Only he met Leusios's gaze and acknowledged him with a slight nod. He nodded in return and then pushed open the door into the old Fire Inn. "I say give them their swords and let them hack each other apart," growled Hal as Leusios entered. The Keetish captain stood with arms folded between 2 bruised Durian nobles. Handley Smith was restraining Teneos Ambronius. Marcos had left with a Thalian shipment south, leaving his younger brother in charge. Teneos' face was flushed with a man's anger and yet streaked with boyish tears. The other Durian was Antoninos Janicus. He was calmly dabbing a cut above his eye and paused to inspect the blood on the cloth. He wore his customary black Kazonii armor, just as Teneos was in the molded breastplate. Durians. Did he ever see them out of armor? Both men had been stripped of their short swords and daggers. The counselors were all there, as well as Vibnia and Kulain. The priest was standing between the antagonists while the magus was in the corner watching the debate with interest.
"And not a single dead enemy to show for it,"
a familiar voice was saying. Jorwin Weaver.
"Good to see you too, Leusios."
The bard stood up and took his wrist in a firm greeting. He was in a weather-stained traveling cloak, and his leathers were muddy from the road.
"Though I wish it were under less tragic circumstances. They killed my brother and left him for the crows,"
yelled Taeneas, and lunged impotently against Hanley's grip.
"There's been another bandit attack,"
Mistress Murgathwin explained to Leusios gravely.
"Against a column of professional legionaries."
Leusios felt a chilling fear uncoil in his stomach. He was very conscious of Antoninus studying him closely from under the cloth held to his temple. Taeneas had landed a good blow.
"Exactly. Bandits be damned,"
snarled Taeneas.
"They're Kazonii mercenaries. No one else could take 3 decarii. 30 men, all dead,"
Leusios gasped.
"Marcus too. I came across them on the southern trade road,"
Jorwin explained.
"Orcs?"
The bard shook his head.
"I did wonder if Blackstone had let some slip through, but the wounds were inflicted by knives and swords, not axes and clubs. A few sentries had their throats slit, sleeping on duty perhaps. The rest were killed in their bedrolls. It was a massacre."
"We must investigate," Leusios decided. Mistress Murgathwin raised an eyebrow.
"I suggest that these men return to their respective factions, and the council debate in private."
Leusios bristled with frustration.
"What is there to debate? This demands action, not talk." "Wait. I would speak first."
Antoninus stood, exuding a cool authority that baited Taeneas into another futile lunge. Mistress Murgathwin nodded.
"Very well. We Kazonii come as friends to Blackstone. We wish you to prosper and have no desire to cause strife."
He let his gaze fall on Leusios.
"You know that we too have suffered the occasional loss to bandits, though nothing as serious as this. It is simply not in our interest to allow banditry to thrive. If the council so wishes it, I can send a messenger bird to ask for more soldiers to support your militia, but only if you desire it." "Thank you, Lord Antoninus."
Myr Barfrain pulled up a stool to the council table.
"We're grateful for the offer, and we'll debate it. Please take your men back to your compound." "He's a murderer!" screamed Taeneas. "As for this young man," Howl growled, "he can remain in a guest room until he's calmed down and the Kazonii have left."
Leusios waited until the Durians had left before exploding.
"Are you mad, Barfrain? More Kazonii troops will turn Blackstone into an armed camp."
The Myr jerked back and spilled his ale.
"Steady on, Master Leusios." "Sorry, Barfrain, but he has a point."
Mistress Murgathwin laid a consolatory hand on the older man's arm.
"I have no intention of agreeing to such an offer,"
the Myr blustered.
"I was simply being gracious. We do not have the warriors to hunt these bandits down. With 30 legionaries dead on the road, my concern is doubled."
Captain Hal watched Antoninus lead his legionaries away.
"We don't have the numbers to hunt bandits and defend Blackstone, but I don't want to depend on them either."
30 dead men need collection and their last rites," pointed out Vibnia. "I will prepare some carts." Frustrated, Leusios' mind raced. What to do? He felt the magus' gaze from where he watched silently, deeply wrapped in his black woolen scarf and cloak. Kulain gave him a slight nod. It nudged him to action.
"Enough talk."
Leusios slammed his palm on the table.
"I need to find out what happened. I'm going south with Vibnia."
"It's too dangerous," Murgathwin warned him with a firm shake of her head. Kulain's voice rumbled from where he sat in the shadows.
"Not if you take Kerne."
That concludes Chapter 5, Rivals. Next week, Kerne and the group set off in pursuit of the bandits, but they soon begin to wonder if someone is hunting them. Safe travels, everyone. See you in a week.